My dear, your soulmate's biggest regret has finally been revealed. And it carries your name in a way nobody expected. For a long time, everyone believed silence meant the story was over. But today, the truth broke that silence forever. Someone finally uncovered the one memory your soulmate has been hiding from the world. And it was never about losing love. It was about losing you. Before this message ends, one forgotten confession will change everything you thought you knew. Listen carefully. Nobody wakes up one morning carrying the weight your soulmate has been carrying unless something truly unforgettable happened. For months, maybe even years, they smiled in front of everyone while hiding a single truth that refused to leave their heart. They convinced friends they had moved on. They convinced family they were ready for a different future. They even tried convincing themselves that forgetting you was possible. But every quiet night ended the same way. Every celebration felt incomplete. Every happy moment carried a strange emptiness that nobody around them could understand. The biggest regret of their life was never speaking when their heart begged them to speak. Never fighting when love asked them to fight. And never reaching for the one person who understood them better than anyone else. You. The strange part is that this regret was never spoken aloud. It remained locked behind polite conversations, forced smiles, and carefully chosen words. Even the people closest to your soulmate believed everything was perfectly fine. But hidden inside an old notebook, buried beneath ordinary pages that nobody bothered to read, were sentences written during one of the hardest nights of their life. Those words were never intended for the public. They were never meant to be discovered. Yet destiny has a way of opening doors that people spend years trying to keep closed. And when those pages were finally found, everyone who read them became completely silent. Don't skip. Because the next part of this story explains why your name appeared over and over again, even though everyone believed your chapter had already ended. The notebook described one unforgettable evening when your soulmate stood alone after pretending to be happy during a family gathering. Everyone thought they were celebrating. Everyone thought laughter filled the house. But the truth was completely different. Behind a closed bedroom door, your soulmate wrote a sentence that nobody expected. The greatest mistake of my life was letting the right person walk away while I listened to everyone except my own heart. That sentence was followed by another. And another. Until every page became a quiet confession of regret. The family never knew those pages existed. Friends never imagined such thoughts had been written. Even the people encouraging your soulmate to move forward had no idea they were unknowingly pushing someone deeper into emotional silence. Every new proposal, every introduction to someone else, every attempt to begin again only reminded them of one unfinished story. The more they tried to forget you, the stronger your memory became. Time kept moving, but regret refused to move with it. One ordinary afternoon, while cleaning an old cabinet before an important family event, someone accidentally discovered the notebook hidden beneath forgotten photographs and unopened envelopes. At first it looked ordinary. Just another personal journal collecting dust. But after reading only a few lines, that person stopped breathing for a moment. The pages were filled with one emotion. Regret. Not anger. Not blame. Just endless regret. Each page revealed another moment your soulmate wished they could live again. The first conversation they wished they had continued. The goodbye they wished they had never accepted. The message they almost sent but deleted. The phone call they stared at for hours but never made. Every memory pointed back toward the same person. You. Not because destiny demanded it. Not because coincidence allowed it. But because love left unfinished always finds a way to return. Don't skip. Because someone made a decision after reading those pages that nobody in the family expected. Instead of hiding the notebook again, they quietly placed it inside a small envelope and carried it downstairs where the rest of the family was discussing future wedding plans. Nobody noticed anything unusual. The conversations continued. Dates were mentioned. Invitations were discussed. Smiles filled the room. But one person remained completely silent while holding the envelope tightly in their hands. They waited. Not for the perfect moment. But for the moment when the truth could no longer remain hidden. And just as your soulmate reached across the table to answer one simple question about their future, the mysterious envelope was slowly placed directly in front of them. The room instantly fell silent. Your soulmate looked at it, recognized the handwriting, and their face lost every trace of confidence. Because they already knew. Someone had finally discovered their biggest regret. The room remained completely silent as your soulmate's trembling fingers rested on the worn envelope. No one spoke. Even the relatives who had been laughing only moments earlier sensed that something far more important than wedding plans had just entered the conversation. The familiar handwriting on the front of the envelope carried memories that had never truly disappeared. Slowly, almost afraid of what waited inside, your soulmate opened it. A single folded page slipped onto the table. Every pair of eyes followed it. No one expected tears before a single word had even been read. Your soulmate stared at the first sentence for several long seconds without moving. Their breathing became uneven. Their hands shook. Finally, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, they began reading aloud. If you are reading this today, it means the truth stayed hidden for far too long. The room froze. Every sentence that followed peeled away another layer of a story the family had never known. It spoke about fear instead of betrayal. Silence instead of rejection. Missed opportunities instead of forgotten love. It described the countless moments when pride stood in the way of one honest conversation. It admitted that pretending to move on had always been easier than admitting how deeply one decision still hurt. No one interrupted. No one dared. The person who had discovered the notebook quietly looked around the room, watching expressions change one by one. Faces that had once been certain about the past were now filled with doubt. Questions replaced confidence. How much had they misunderstood? How many assumptions had become accepted as truth? Your soulmate reached the final lines of the page. Then stopped. Their eyes closed. A single tear landed on the paper. The silence became almost unbearable. Then, without warning, your soulmate spoke words no one in the room ever imagined they would hear. I never stopped wondering what would have happened if I had chosen courage instead of fear. Those words echoed through the house. No one had an answer. One elderly family member slowly sat down, realizing that years of advice, pressure, and expectations may have pushed two people farther apart instead of bringing them closer together. Outside, the afternoon sun began to disappear behind gathering clouds. Inside, every conversation about wedding arrangements had completely ended. Something much bigger had taken its place. And then, someone quietly walked into the room carrying an old photograph that no one had seen in years. The moment your soulmate looked at it, everything changed again. The old photograph rested gently on the table, its edges faded by time but its meaning untouched. Everyone leaned closer, trying to understand why such an ordinary picture had suddenly become the center of the room. Your soulmate reached for it with careful hands, almost as if they feared the memory itself might disappear the moment they touched it. The photograph captured a day that had seemed completely ordinary when it happened, yet now every small detail felt important. There were familiar smiles, familiar places, and in the background, almost unnoticed, was the quiet moment where your paths had crossed in a way nobody appreciated at the time. Looking at it now, your soulmate realized something painful. That day had offered countless chances to speak honestly, to ignore outside opinions, and to protect what truly mattered. Instead, fear had quietly won. Regret had begun growing from that exact moment without anyone realizing it. The room remained silent as your soulmate continued staring at the picture, remembering conversations they had buried deep inside their heart. Every forgotten promise suddenly returned with perfect clarity. Every unfinished sentence demanded to be heard again. Don't skip. Because the next discovery answered the one question everyone had been asking. The family member who had found the notebook gently pointed toward the back of the photograph. There was writing hidden there. Your soulmate slowly turned it over, and everyone watched in complete silence. The faded ink was difficult to read, but one sentence remained perfectly clear: some people are sent into our lives only once. If we let them leave because of fear, no success afterward will ever feel complete. Nobody knew who had written those words or when they had been added. Yet they described exactly what your soulmate had been carrying for all this time. One by one, the relatives lowered their eyes, remembering the advice they had once given with complete confidence. They had believed they were protecting the future. They had never imagined they were helping create the deepest regret of someone's life. Your soulmate folded the photograph carefully and placed it beside the notebook. Then, after taking a long breath, they stood up. Their voice was calm, but every word carried a weight that could no longer be hidden. I've spent too many years pretending that silence could erase what my heart already knew. No one interrupted. No one argued. At that very moment, a phone resting on the corner of the table suddenly lit up with an unexpected notification. It wasn't the message itself that shocked everyone. It was the name displayed on the screen. The room fell silent once again, because that single name threatened to reopen a chapter everyone believed had ended forever. The screen remained illuminated for several long seconds, yet no one reached for the phone. Every heartbeat in the room seemed louder than before. Your soulmate stared at the familiar name, not because it was unexpected, but because seeing it again brought back every emotion they had spent years trying to bury. The notification itself was surprisingly simple. There were no dramatic words. No emotional confession. Just a brief message connected to an old memory that had somehow resurfaced at the exact moment the notebook and photograph had been revealed. That coincidence alone was enough to leave everyone speechless. One family member quietly whispered that perhaps some stories refused to stay unfinished forever. Another simply looked away, realizing that the past had never truly disappeared. Your soulmate slowly picked up the phone, read the message once, then read it again, as though searching for meaning hidden between the lines. Their expression changed completely. The fear that had controlled them for so long slowly gave way to determination. For the first time in years, they understood that the greatest regret was never losing a moment. It was allowing fear to decide what happened next. Don't skip. Because what happened only a few minutes later forced the entire family to question everything they believed. The room remained completely still as your soulmate placed the phone beside the old notebook. They looked around at every familiar face before speaking with unusual honesty. All these years, they said quietly, I blamed circumstances. I blamed timing. I blamed everyone except myself. But the truth is much simpler. I stayed silent when honesty mattered most. No one argued with those words. The silence itself became an answer. An older relative slowly admitted that many decisions had been made with good intentions but without ever asking what your soulmate truly wanted. Those words hung heavily in the air. One by one, forgotten conversations were remembered. Small misunderstandings that once seemed insignificant suddenly revealed how they had slowly grown into years of distance. Then another surprise appeared. Hidden inside the envelope that everyone thought was already empty was one final folded page. Your soulmate carefully unfolded it. Unlike the earlier pages, this one contained no long explanation. It ended with a single handwritten sentence. If life ever gives you one more chance, don't let fear write the ending. Your soulmate closed their eyes for a moment, holding the page tightly. When they looked up again, the uncertainty that had followed them for so long had disappeared. They made a quiet decision that no one in the room had expected. Without another word, they reached for their keys, picked up the notebook, folded the photograph into the envelope, and walked toward the front door. Every family member watched in complete silence. No one tried to stop them. Because for the first time, everyone understood exactly where they were going. And just as your soulmate stepped outside, A car slowly pulled into the driveway carrying someone whose arrival would change the rest of the story forever. The car came to a gentle stop, and for a brief moment, no one moved. Every person standing outside seemed to understand that this was not simply another arrival, it was the beginning of the conversation that should have happened years ago. Your soulmate took one slow step forward, no longer carrying the fear that had once controlled every decision. The notebook, the photograph, and the letter had all led to this single moment of truth. There were no dramatic speeches, no accusations, and no attempts to blame the past. Instead, there was honesty, the one thing that had been missing for so long. Your soulmate quietly admitted that their greatest regret had never been losing time, but allowing silence to replace courage when it mattered most. The family watched without interruption, realizing that love cannot be rewritten by pressure, expectations, or the opinions of others. Old misunderstandings finally gave way to clear conversations, and hearts that had remained closed for years slowly began to open again. For the first time, the weight of regret started to disappear, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. Some journeys do not end where people expect them to, they end where truth is finally welcomed. Your soulmate smiled through tears, knowing that whatever happened next would be built on honesty instead of fear. The future was no longer controlled by yesterday's mistakes. It was shaped by the courage to face them. And that became the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes the biggest regret is not the love we lose, but the words we never had the courage to say. From that day forward, your soulmate promised never to let fear speak louder than the heart again. And with that promise, a new chapter quietly began. Leaving the past behind and embracing hope for whatever tomorrow would bring.